The reservation was for 7 p.m. at the summit. I'd chosen it carefully: intimate lighting, panoramic views of Portland's skyline, and a quiet corner table perfect for celebrating 12 years of marriage. I arrived 15 minutes early, smoothing the silk of my emerald dress as the maître d' led me to our table. The champagne I'd pre-ordered waited in an ice bucket, beads of condensation trailing down the bottle like tears. Daniel had texted that he was running late, an important client. Meeting had gone long. It wasn't unusual. After 12 years, I'd grown accustomed to waiting. What I hadn't expected was to wait for my husband to arrive with another woman. At 7:20, I spotted Daniel's familiar silhouette approaching through the restaurant. His hand rested on the small of a woman's back, guiding her between tables with the same protective gesture he'd once used with me. She was stunning, dark hair cascading over bare shoulders, a fitted black dress that spoke of youth without trying too hard. They were laughing about something, completely absorbed in each other, until Daniel glanced up and saw me waiting. For just a moment. His step faltered. I watched the realization dawn on his face as he remembered what day it was. Our anniversary. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'd met Daniel Reynolds during my final year of graduate school at Portland State. I was studying urban planning while working part-time at a local developer's office. He was finishing his MBA with dreams of investment banking. We were both ambitious, both determined to leave our mark on the world. When we married 3 years later, we promised to build our dreams together. And we did. My Reynolds Development Group had transformed Portland's riverfront with sustainable mixed-use projects, while Daniel had climbed to senior partner at Westlake Financial. We were the power couple our friends both admired and envied. "Olivia," Daniel said as they reached the table, his voice eerily calm given the circumstances. "This is Sofia Garcia, a new analyst from work. We were just finishing up some projections for the East Side project when I realized the time." His eyes pleaded with me silently as he pulled out a chair for Sofia. "I hope you don't mind that." I invited her to join us. Sofia extended her hand, a diamond tennis bracelet glinting at her wrist. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Olivia. Daniel talks about you all the time." Her smile seemed genuine, which somehow made it worse. Either she had no idea what day it was, or she was an exceptional actress. I took her hand, noting the softness of her skin, the perfect manicure. "What a surprise," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Years of negotiating with difficult clients had taught me to keep my expression neutral even when caught off guard. Daniel didn't mention he was bringing a colleague. Something flickered in Sofia's eyes, confusion, perhaps embarrassment. She glanced at Daniel, who was busying himself with the wine list, his knuckles white against the leather cover. "I didn't realize. Is this a special occasion?" she asked. I held Daniel's gaze as I answered. "Our anniversary, actually, 12 years today." Sofia's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, I had no idea. Daniel, you didn't— I should go." She began gathering her purse, but Daniel placed a hand on her arm. "It's fine," he insisted, though nothing about this was fine. "Olivia understands how important the East Side project is. We can still celebrate while wrapping up work details." The waiter approached with the champagne I'd ordered. "Shall I pour, madam?" he asked, looking uncertainly between the three of us. "Please," I replied. "We might as well toast to, partnerships." As the waiter filled 3 flutes instead of the 2 I'd anticipated, I observed my husband's body language. The way he angled toward Sofia, the protective arm he'd rested on the back of her chair, the nervous tap of his finger against the table, all telling signs I'd somehow missed until this moment. Or perhaps I hadn't missed them at all, but had chosen not to assemble the puzzle pieces scattered across the past few months. The late nights that had become increasingly frequent. the weekend client meetings that couldn't be rescheduled, the sudden interest in his appearance, new clothes, a different cologne, extra hours at the gym, the decreased intimacy explained away by stress and exhaustion. I raised my champagne. To 12 years, I said simply. Daniel's glass trembled slightly as he lifted it. To 12 years. Sophia's discomfort was palpable as she took the smallest sip possible. "This champagne is lovely," she murmured, clearly searching for neutral territory. Under the soft lighting of the summit, with Portland's twinkling skyline as a backdrop, I made a decision. I would not cause a scene. I would not give Daniel the satisfaction of painting me as the hysterical wife. I would not let the curious glances from nearby tables become tomorrow's gossip. Most importantly, I would not relinquish my power by reacting, without all the information. "So, Sophia," I said, unfolding my napkin with deliberate precision, "tell me about yourself. How long have you been at Westlake?" For the next hour, I conducted what might have seemed like an ordinary dinner conversation to anyone observing us. I asked Sophia about her background. Master's from UCLA, first-generation college graduate, moved to Portland 8 months ago. Her role at Westlake, junior analyst specializing in commercial real estate financing, and her impressions of the city. Loved the food scene, still adjusting to the rain. I noted how Daniel grew increasingly uneasy as the conversation progressed, especially when I asked specific questions about the East Side project they'd supposedly been working on. "The demographic projections are particularly interesting," I remarked, watching Daniel's jaw tighten. "Those residential units above the retail space, what's the target market again?" Sophia glanced at Daniel before answering. "We're focusing on young professionals and empty nesters looking to downsize. The proximity to public transportation makes it attractive to both demographics." "Fascinating," I replied, taking a deliberate sip of water. Because when Daniel described the project to me last month, he mentioned it was exclusively luxury condominiums for the 55-plus market. A heavy silence fell over the table. Daniel cleared his throat. "The projections have evolved since then," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Sophia's market analysis suggested a more diverse approach would yield better returns." "Clearly, Sophia has valuable insights," I said, my gaze steady on my husband's face. "You must work closely together." The waiter arrived with our entrees, providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. I'd lost my appetite hours ago, but I cut my salmon into precise pieces, taking small bites as I continued my assessment of the situation. Sophia's discomfort had evolved into something closer to suspicion. She was smart enough to sense that the narrative wasn't aligning. "Olivia's company is handling the actual development," Daniel explained to Sophia, perhaps attempting to redirect the conversation. "She's the real genius behind the project. I'm just helping secure the financing." "Don't be modest, Daniel," I replied. "I'm sure you've been putting in extra hours to ensure everything runs smoothly. All those late nights must be exhausting." Sophia set down her fork, looking between us. "I think I should go," she said quietly. "This is clearly a personal evening, and I'm intruding." "Nonsense," I said, my smile firmly in place. "We're almost finished with dinner, and I'm learning so much about the work you two have been doing." As we picked at our food, I mentally cataloged the inconsistencies in their story. The East Side project had been in development for months, but Sophia had only recently joined the financing team according to her earlier comments. Daniel had told me he was working with senior partner Richard Hayes on this project, never mentioning a junior analyst. And most tellingly, when Sophia described the building specifications, she'd mentioned details that weren't public knowledge, details only someone with access to private files or someone who'd been to the site multiple times would know. I thought about the lipstick smudge I'd found on Daniel's collar 3 weeks ago, dismissed as a printing toner accident. The unexplained credit card charges at the Cascade Hotel downtown, which Daniel had attributed to client meetings. The text, messages that made him smile when he thought I wasn't looking. When the dessert menus arrived, I declined. "It's getting late," I said, checking my watch. "Perhaps we should call it a night." "I'll get the check," Daniel offered, clearly relieved that the evening was concluding. "Actually," I countered, "I think we should split it. After all, this wasn't the anniversary dinner I had planned." Daniel's face flushed. Sophia stared at her lap, suddenly fascinated by the napkin she was twisting between her fingers. "Olivia," Daniel began, but I cut him off with a raised hand. "I'm curious, Sophia," I said, leaning forward slightly. "Did Daniel mention he was married when you started working together?" Sophia's eyes widened. "Of course. Everyone at the office knows Daniel is married." "And when did your professional relationship become personal?" Daniel's hand came down hard on the table, rattling the silverware. "Olivia, that's enough." "Is it?" I asked, keeping my voice deliberately even. "Because I think I've been more than accommodating this evening, considering my husband brought his girlfriend to our anniversary dinner." Sophia's face drained of color. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We're not. She turned to Daniel. "You said your marriage was essentially over, that you were just waiting for the right time to separate." And there it was, the confirmation I needed, delivered in a trembling voice across a table strewn with the remnants of a celebration turned confrontation. "How interesting," I said, feeling strangely calm as the final pieces clicked into place. "Because this is the first I'm hearing of our impending separation." The waiter approached with the bill, his professional demeanor firmly in place despite the obvious tension at our table. Daniel reached for it, but I was faster. "Allow me," I said, sliding my credit card into the leather folder. "Consider it my gift to you both." While we waited for the waiter to return, I gathered my purse and shawl. Sophia looked close to tears, while Daniel sat in stony silence, his earlier confidence evaporated. "I should apologize, Sophia," I said, surprising them both. "It seems my husband has misled us both, but I'm grateful that he brought you tonight." "You are?" Daniel asked suspiciously. "Absolutely," I replied, signing the credit card receipt as the waiter returned. "It saved me the trouble of investigating further. I already had my suspicions, but seeing you together confirmed everything I needed to know." I stood, smoothing my dress. "Sophia, I suggest you consider whether a man who would lie to his wife of 12 years is likely to be truthful with you. Daniel, I'll be staying at the Avalon tonight. I expect you to be moved out by the time I return tomorrow." "Olivia, wait," Daniel called as I walked away. "We need to talk about this." I paused, turning back to face them one last time. "Oh, there's plenty to discuss, like the fact that I've documented every inconsistency in your stories about the East Side project, which makes me wonder what's really happening with those funds, and the curious timing of Sophia's hiring 8 months ago, right after Westlake secured the financing contract for my company's development. My attorney will be in touch. Enjoy the rest of your evening." As I walked through the restaurant, head high despite the curious glances, I felt something unexpected. Relief. The months of doubt, of questioning my instincts, of making excuses for Daniel's behavior were behind me. The pain would come later, I knew, but in this moment, clarity was its own kind of freedom. Outside, Portland's autumn rain had started, gentle drops catching in the glow of streetlights. I opened my umbrella and stepped into the night, already composing a message to Maya, my executive assistant. We had work to do, a financial audit to initiate, security protocols to change, and a development project to protect. The East Side project had always been more than just another development. To me, it represented everything I had worked toward: sustainable design, community integration, affordable housing alongside premium retail space. I wouldn't let Daniel's betrayal taint that vision. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is Sophia. I need to talk to you. There's more you should know." I stared at the screen, raindrops occasionally blurring the text. After a moment's consideration, I typed back, "Pacific Coffee, 8 a.m. tomorrow." Whatever Sophia wanted to tell me, it would be on my terms, in a public place, after I'd had time to process and prepare. As I slipped my phone back into my purse, I caught my reflection in a darkened store window. The emerald dress I'd chosen, so carefully, the pearls that had been an anniversary gift years earlier, the composed expression that revealed nothing of the turmoil beneath. 12 years of marriage had ended across a white tablecloth, between sips of champagne and carefully measured words. Yet somehow, I was still standing. I hailed a taxi and directed the driver to the Avalon Hotel. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations, legal consultations, and the beginning of a new chapter I hadn't anticipated. But tonight, in a quiet hotel room overlooking the city I was helping to build, I would allow myself to acknowledge the truth I had suspected, but avoided for too long. The partnership I had believed in existed only in my imagination. The taxi pulled away from the curb, carrying me toward an uncertain future. Behind me, through the rain-streaked window of the summit, I could see Daniel and Sophia still sitting at our table, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of candlelight as they grappled with the consequences of their choices. For just a moment, I felt a twinge of sympathy for them both, caught in a web of their own making, facing a storm they hadn't anticipated. Then the traffic light changed, the taxi moved forward, and I turned my gaze toward what lay ahead rather than what I was leaving behind. As I walked through the restaurant, head high despite the curious glances, I felt something unexpected: relief. The months of doubt, of questioning my instincts, of making excuses for Daniel's behavior were behind me. The pain would come later, I knew, but in this moment, clarity was its own kind of freedom. Outside, Portland's autumn rain had started, gentle drops catching in the glow of streetlights. I opened my umbrella and stepped into the night, already composing a message to Maya, my executive assistant. We had work to do, a financial audit to initiate, security protocols to change, and a development project to protect. The East Side project had always been more than just another development. To me, it represented everything I had worked toward: sustainable design, community integration, affordable housing alongside premium retail space. I wouldn't let Daniel's betrayal taint that vision. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is Sophia. I need to talk to you. There's more you should know." I stared at the screen, raindrops occasionally blurring the text. After a moment's consideration, I typed back, "Pacific Coffee, 8 a.m. tomorrow." Whatever Sophia wanted to tell me, it would be on my terms, in a public place, after I'd had time to process and prepare. As I slipped my phone back into my purse, I caught my reflection in a darkened store window. The emerald dress I'd chosen, so carefully, the pearls that had been an anniversary gift years earlier, the composed expression that revealed nothing of the turmoil beneath. 12 years of marriage had ended across a white tablecloth, between sips of champagne and carefully measured words. Yet somehow, I was still standing. I hailed a taxi and directed the driver to the Avalon Hotel. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations, legal consultations, and the beginning of a new chapter I hadn't anticipated. But tonight, in a quiet hotel room overlooking the city I was helping to build, I would allow myself to acknowledge the truth I had suspected, but avoided for too long. The partnership I had believed in existed only in my imagination. The taxi pulled away from the curb, carrying me toward an uncertain future. Behind me, Through the rain-streaked window of the summit, I could see Daniel and Sophia still sitting at our table, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of candlelight as they grappled with the consequences of their choices. For just a moment, I felt a twinge of sympathy for them both, caught in a web of their own making, facing a storm they hadn't anticipated. Then the traffic light changed, the taxi moved forward, and I turned my gaze toward what lay ahead rather than what I was leaving behind. The Avalon's lobby embraced me with warmth and anonymity, plush carpets absorbing the sound of my heels, discreet staff who asked no questions when I requested a room with a view. Within 20 minutes, I was standing at a floor-to-ceiling window in a suite on the 15th floor, watching raindrops trace meandering paths down the glass. The city lights blurred beyond, a watercolor painting of the life I'd helped shape. I slipped off my heels and removed the pearls from around my neck, placing them on the marble countertop of the bathroom. The woman who stared back at me from the mirror looked surprisingly composed. No mascara tracks, no reddened eyes, just a slight tightness around the mouth that betrayed tension. My phone buzzed again. Daniel this time. 3 messages in quick succession. Olivia, please call me. This isn't what you think. We need to talk before you do anything hasty. I set the phone down without responding and turned on the shower, letting steam fill the bathroom as I peeled away the emerald dress. Under the hot spray, I finally allowed myself to feel, not just the anger or the shock, but the profound sadness of realizing a chapter of my life was ending. 12 years. A third of my life spent building a future with someone who had casually discarded our vows. Yet beneath the grief, something else stirred. A quiet determination, a certainty that whatever came next, I would face it with the same resolve that had built Reynolds Development from a one-woman operation to one of Portland's most respected firms. I had survived professional setbacks, market crashes, and cutthroat competitors. I would survive this too. After the shower, wrapped in the hotel's plush robe, I made 2 calls. The first was to Maya, my executive assistant, and the closest thing I had to a confidant in my professional life. I need you to clear my morning schedule, I told her when she answered, despite the late hour. And I need copies of all financial documents related to the Eastside project, particularly anything involving Westlake Financial's involvement. Maya, ever efficient, asked no unnecessary questions. Everything all right, Olivia? No, I replied. Honestly. Daniel and I are separating, and I have reason to believe there may be irregularities with the Eastside financing. A brief pause. I'll have everything ready by 9:30. And I'll contact Liam in legal to be on standby. Thank you, Maya. One more thing. Can you book me into the Avalon for a week? I'll need time to make arrangements. The second call was to Thomas Bennett, a private investigator I'd worked with when vetting potential business partners. His gruff voice answered on the third ring. Bennett Investigations. Thomas, it's Olivia Reynolds. Mrs. Reynolds, this is an unexpected hour for a call. I apologize for the late hour, but I need your services on a personal matter. How soon can we meet? For you? I can be at your office first thing tomorrow. Not my office, Pacific's. Coffee on Burnside, 9:15 a.m. Trouble? You could say that. After ending the call, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything I could remember about Daniel's behavior over the past 8 months. The unexplained absences, the inconsistent stories, the changes in routine. Then I shifted to the Eastside project, noting every discrepancy between what Daniel had told me and what Sophia had revealed at dinner. The picture that emerged was troubling. Not just a husband's infidelity, but potential financial impropriety involving millions in development funds. By 1 a.m., exhaustion finally overcame adrenaline. I closed the laptop and slipped between the hotel's crisp sheets, setting my alarm for 6:30. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by dreams of falling in empty rooms where I searched for something unnamed, but essential. Morning arrived with a clarity that only comes after rain. Portland's skyline stood sharp against a washed blue sky, the mountains visible in the distance for the first time in weeks. I dressed with deliberate care: charcoal pencil skirt, ivory silk blouse, black blazer, low heels. Battle armor of a different sort than last night's emerald dress, but no less intentional. My hair swept into a sleek chignon, minimal makeup, no jewelry except my watch, a gift to myself when Reynolds Development signed its first seven-figure contract. Pacific Coffee sat on a corner of Burnside Street, large windows flooding the space with morning light. I arrived at 7:50, ordered a black coffee, and chose a table near the back with a clear view of both the entrance and the street outside. The cafe was busy with the morning rush, professionals grabbing caffeine before work, students hunched over laptops, the occasional tourist consulting a map. At 7:58, Sophia entered. She'd transformed from last night's sophisticated dinner companion to something more subdued. Dark jeans, a gray sweater, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her eyes scanned the cafe until they found me. I didn't wave or smile, simply watched as she navigated between tables toward me. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, setting her purse on an empty chair. "I wasn't sure you would. I prefer having all the information before making decisions," I replied. "Coffee?" She shook her head. "I can't stay long. I told the office I had a doctor's appointment, but I only have about 20 minutes. I leaned back slightly, allowing the server to place my coffee on the table. "Then I suggest you start talking." Sophia's fingers twisted together on the tabletop. Up close, without the softening effect of restaurant lighting, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "First, I want to say I'm sorry. I genuinely didn't know. Last night was your anniversary. Daniel told me you were out of town at a conference. And you believed him. I had no reason not to." She met my eyes directly. "Daniel told me 8 months ago that your marriage was in name only, that you were both staying together for professional appearances while living separate lives. He said you had an understanding." The lie was so audacious it almost made me laugh. "Clearly we didn't, but I doubt you asked to meet to apologize for an affair." Sophia glanced around, lowering her voice. "It's about the East Side project. The numbers don't add up, and I think Daniel knows it. There's money being funneled through shell companies, construction contracts with inflated costs, materials that never arrive but somehow get paid for." My stomach tightened. "And you know this how?" "I'm a financial analyst, Mrs. Reynolds. It's my job to notice discrepancies. 3 weeks ago, I found invoices for environmental remediation work that had supposedly been completed, but when I checked the inspection records, they showed the work was still pending. When I brought it to Daniel's attention, he told me to ignore it, that it was a timing issue that would resolve itself." "Did you bring these concerns to anyone else at Westlake?" Sophia's gaze dropped to the table. "I tried. My direct supervisor said Daniel had special authorization for the East Side project and that I should defer to him on all matters related to it." "Why are you telling me this now?" Her eyes met mine again, determination replacing uncertainty. "Because after last night, I realized Daniel has been lying about everything. If he lied about your marriage, what else is he lying about? And I refuse to be complicit in financial fraud." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. What I saw instead was fear mixed with resolve, the expression of someone who had discovered they were in over their head, but was trying to find their way back to solid ground. "Do you have documentation?" I asked. Sophia nodded, reaching into her purse to withdraw a USB drive. "Copies of everything I found. Invoices, bank transfers, communications. I've been making backups for weeks, just in case. After your comments last night about inconsistencies in the project, I'm convinced something illegal is happening." I took the USB drive, turning it over in my palm. You're taking a significant risk coming to me with this. Less risk than being caught in a federal investigation for financial fraud, she replied grimly. Which is where this is headed if the SEC ever audits the project. Why not go to the authorities? Because I don't know who else at Westlake might be involved. And because, she hesitated, because despite everything, I hoped there might be an explanation that doesn't end with Daniel in prison. I thought you deserved to know first. The sentiment was surprisingly thoughtful, given the circumstances. Does Daniel know you're meeting me? Sophia shook her head. No. He's been texting me since last night, but I haven't responded. I needed time to think about what to do. My watch showed 8:17. Thomas Bennett would arrive in less than an hour. Sophia, I appreciate you bringing this to me. I'll need time to review the information and consult with my legal team. What will you do? The question was almost a whisper. That depends on what I find, but I suggest you consider your own position carefully. If these allegations are true, you'll want legal representation of your own. Sophia stood, gathering her purse. One more thing you should know. Daniel isn't the only one involved. There's someone above him, someone with more influence who's been directing the operation. I don't know who, but in the emails they're referred to as the architect. The cryptic title sent a chill down my spine. How do you know it's not Daniel himself? Because I've seen emails between them. Daniel reports to this person, provides updates, follows instructions. Sophia hesitated at the table edge. Be careful, Mrs. Reynolds. I think this goes deeper than either of us realized. I watched her leave, the USB drive heavy in my hand. Outside the cafe window, Sophia paused on the sidewalk, checking her phone before hurrying toward the parking garage across the street. I sipped my coffee, mind racing with implications. If what Sophia claimed was true, the East Side project, my project, had become a vehicle for financial fraud, possibly orchestrated by someone with significant power at Westlake Financial. Thomas Bennett arrived precisely at 9:15, his weathered face scanning the cafe with professional assessment before settling on me. He wore what I'd come to think of as his uniform: navy blazer over a plain button-down, no tie, practical shoes. At 52, with salt and pepper hair and lines etched deeply around his eyes, he looked like what he was, a man who had seen the darker side of human nature but hadn't let it crush his fundamental decency. Mrs. Reynolds, he greeted, sliding into the chair Sophia had vacated. You're looking well, considering the circumstances. What circumstances would those be, Thomas? A slight smile creased his face. The ones that have you meeting a PI in a coffee shop at 9 a.m. instead of running. Your morning executive meeting. The ones that put that look in your eye. The one that says someone's crossed a line they shouldn't have. I pushed the USB drive across the table. I need you to analyze the contents of this. Financial records, communications, anything that might indicate fraud related to the East Side Development Project. Bennett pocketed the drive. Corporate espionage? Possibly, but it's more personal than that. I gave him a concise summary of the previous evening and Sophia's allegations. Bennett listened without interruption, his expression neutral but attentive. So the husband's been sleeping with a junior analyst while potentially embezzling from your project, he summarized when I finished. And this analyst believes there's someone higher up pulling the strings. That about cover it? In essence. Bennett leaned forward. Mrs. Reynolds, in my experience, when personal and financial impropriety overlap, things tend to get messy, very quickly. What exactly are you looking to accomplish here? It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself since leaving the summit. I want the truth, Thomas. About Daniel, about the East Side Project, about who the architect might be. Once I have that, I can decide how to proceed. And if the truth implicates your husband in serious financial crimes, Then he'll face the consequences, just as I'm facing the consequences of his personal betrayal. Bennett studied me for a moment, then nodded. I'll need access to your personal and company records, phone logs, emails, financial statements, anything that might connect to either the affair or the potential fraud. Maya will provide whatever you need. She'll meet you at my office at 10:30. I slid a key card across the table. This will get you into the executive floor. Use the private elevator in the parking garage. You're not coming? I have another meeting first, with a lawyer who specializes in both divorce and corporate fraud. Bennett's eyebrows rose slightly, moving quickly. I've found it's better to be prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. I gathered my purse and stood. One more thing, Thomas. I need surveillance on Daniel. Discreet but thorough. I want to know who he meets, where he goes, what he does. Understood. I'll put my best people on it. Bennett stood as well. Mrs. Reynolds, a word of caution. If this fraud is as sophisticated as it sounds, the people behind it won't appreciate your investigation. Watch your back. I nodded, appreciating his concern. I always do. The law offices of Hargrove, Mendez, and Klein occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming tower in downtown Portland. I'd worked with Elena Mendez on several development deals over the years, respecting her sharp intellect and strategic approach. Now I sat across from her in a conference room with views of Mount Hood in the distance, laying out the complex intersection of my personal and professional crises. Elena listened intently, occasionally making notes on a leather-bound pad. When I finished, she set down her pen and folded her hands on the table. Olivia, I've known you for what, 8 years now? I've never seen you rattled. Not when the riverfront project nearly collapsed after the environmental survey. Not when the city council threatened to revoke your permits for the South Park development. But this has you shaken? Not shaken, I corrected. Focused. A smile touched Elena's lips. Fair enough. Let's talk strategy. On the personal front, Oregon is an equitable distribution state. Given the length of your marriage and your respective financial contributions, we're looking at a relatively straightforward division of assets, assuming no prenuptial agreement. No prenup. We married before either of us had significant assets. That simplifies things in some ways, complicates them in others. Your company's value will be considered marital property, though we can argue for limitations based on its growth trajectory and your personal expertise. And if Daniel is involved in financial fraud using my company's development project? Elena's expression grew more serious. That's where our paths diverge from a standard divorce. If we can prove Daniel used his position at Westlake to defraud your company or investors, it strengthens our position considerably. But it also opens legal exposure that extends beyond your marriage. Meaning we need to ensure Reynolds' development is insulated from whatever may be happening at Westlake. We need to document that you had no knowledge of any impropriety, that you took immediate action once suspicions arose, and that your company has robust compliance procedures that were circumvented by external parties. I nodded. I've already initiated a financial audit of the Eastside project and all related contracts. Good. We should also prepare formal notifications to relevant regulatory bodies, the SEC, state financial regulators, possibly the FBI's white-collar crime division, depending on what the audit reveals. The mention of federal authorities made the situation's gravity sink in more deeply. This could destroy Reynolds Development's reputation, couldn't it? Even if we're the victims. Elena didn't sugarcoat her response. It could certainly damage it, but attempting to conceal potential fraud once discovered would be far more destructive. Your best protection is transparency and proactive cooperation with authorities. And Daniel? Your husband has made his choices, Olivia. Now he'll live, with the consequences both personal and professional. Elena's tone softened slightly, I know this isn't just about business for you. 12 years of marriage doesn't disappear overnight, regardless of the circumstances. The simple acknowledgement of the personal loss beneath the professional crisis unexpectedly tightened my throat. I keep thinking about all the moments I missed, the signs that should have been obvious. How could I not have known? Elena reached across the table, briefly touching my hand. Because you trusted him. That's not a failure on your part. It's a betrayal on his. Now, let's make sure you're protected going forward. For the next hour, we mapped out a comprehensive strategy. Legal filings for separation, financial protections for Reynolds development, communication plans for investors and partners, contingency scenarios based on what the audit might reveal. By the time I left Elena's office, I had a clear roadmap for navigating the challenges ahead. My phone showed 7 missed calls from Daniel and a series of increasingly urgent text messages. I ignored them all as I rode the elevator down to the lobby. Whatever explanation or justification he wanted to offer could wait until I had more information. Outside, Portland's midday bustle continued unabated. People hurrying between meetings, tourists consulting maps, food carts doing brisk business despite the lingering dampness from last night's rain. I stood for a moment on the steps of the law office, watching this ordinary flow of life that somehow continued while mine had been upended. My phone rang again. Not Daniel this time, but Maya. "Bennett's here," she said without preamble. "He's reviewing the financial documents now. And Olivia, he found something you need to see immediately." "What is it?" "Not over the phone, but it involves Richard Hayes." Richard Hayes, Westlake Financial's managing partner, Daniel's mentor, and one of Portland's most respected financial figures. A man whose recommendations had helped secure funding for 3 of my major development projects. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. As I hailed a taxi, a familiar car caught my attention across the street. Daniel's Tesla, parked in a loading zone, and walking rapidly toward it, expression tight with concern, was Richard Hayes himself. I ducked into the taxi before either man could spot me. "Reynolds Development on Hawthorne, please. And could you take Morrison Bridge? There's someone I'd rather avoid downtown." As the taxi pulled away, I watched in the side mirror as Daniel emerged from a coffee shop, meeting Hayes on the sidewalk. Their body language suggested tension. Hayes gesturing emphatically, Daniel's shoulders hunched, defensively. The pieces were beginning to align, forming a picture I didn't want to see but could no longer ignore. The architect had just stepped into view, and judging by the urgent summons from Bennett, the blueprint he'd designed was about to be exposed. The ride to Reynolds Development took exactly 13 minutes, each one filled with questions spinning through my mind. What had Bennett found? How deeply was Richard Hayes involved? And most troubling, how had I missed the connections that now seemed so obvious in retrospect? Richard Hayes had been the one to introduce Daniel and me to each other at a fundraising gala 15 years ago. He had mentored Daniel throughout his career at Westlake, championed my early development projects when other financiers were skeptical, and even given a toast at our wedding. If he was the architect behind whatever was happening with the East Side project, the betrayal extended far beyond my marriage. The Reynolds Development headquarters occupied a renovated warehouse in the Hawthorne district. Exposed brick walls, open workspaces, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. I designed it to reflect our company values: transparency, sustainability, community integration. Now the irony of those transparent glass walls wasn't lost on me as I entered through the private entrance, avoiding the curious glances of my employees. Maya met me at the elevator, tablet in hand, her usual composed demeanor slightly frayed at the edges. "Bennett's in your office. I've cleared your schedule for the rest of the day and implemented the security protocol changes you requested. Daniel's access cards have been deactivated, and IT has revoked his remote access to all systems. Has he tried to contact anyone here? He called the main line twice asking for you. I had reception tell him you were in meetings all day. Good. What about the document review for the East Side project? Liam and his team are working through everything now. Initial findings should be ready by 5. She hesitated. Olivia, there's something else. The Portland Business Journal called for comment about rumors of financial irregularities with the East Side development. I stopped mid-stride. Already? How could they possibly know? They wouldn't say, just that they're running a story tomorrow about potential compliance issues with the project. This was moving too quickly. Someone was orchestrating events, trying to get ahead of whatever Bennett had discovered. Call Melissa in PR. Tell her to prepare a statement emphasizing our commitment to transparency and that we're conducting a routine financial review of all active projects. Nothing defensive, nothing that confirms specific concerns. Maya nodded, making notes. And if they ask about Westlake specifically? No comment on our financial partners at this time. Bennett was standing at my office window when I entered, staring out at the river with his hands clasped behind his back. He turned as the door closed, his expression grim. I see why you brought me in, he said without preamble. This goes well beyond a cheating husband. Tell me. He gestured to my computer where multiple documents were already open on the screen. The USB drive your husband's girlfriend provided contains a wealth of information: financial transfers, email communications, contract modifications. It paints a concerning picture of the East Side project. I moved to my desk, scanning the open files. How concerning? From what I can tell, approximately $20 million has been diverted from the project through a series of shell companies over the past 7 months. The money trail leads through several offshore accounts before disappearing completely. The amount staggered me. 20 million? That's nearly a third of the project's total budget. Yes, and here's where it gets interesting. Bennett tapped one of the documents on screen, an email exchange between Daniel. Reynolds of Westlake. Com and an account identified only as Archa Secure Mail. Net. These communications appear to show Daniel receiving instructions from this architect person about which contracts to modify, which vendors to use, and how to structure the financial transfers to avoid detection. I skimmed the emails, feeling increasingly sick. Daniel's responses were deferential, almost eager to please. Implemented the changes as requested. The latest transfer has been completed without issues. No one at Reynolds has noticed the discrepancies. He was actively working to ensure I wouldn't discover the fraud, I said quietly, using his knowledge of our internal processes to circumvent them. Bennett nodded. It appears so, but he was just the middleman. The real question is, who's behind the Arch email account? I think I may know. I told Bennett about seeing Richard Hayes meeting with Daniel downtown. Hayes has the authority to approve special financial arrangements at Westlake. He has relationships with international investors that could explain the offshore accounts. And he has intimate knowledge of both my company and the East Side project. It's a solid theory, Bennett agreed. But theories don't hold up in court. We need evidence linking Hayes directly to these communications. I gestured to the emails on screen. Can't you trace the account? Already tried. It's a sophisticated encrypted service that specializes in anonymity, but there might be another way. Bennett pulled out his phone, showing me a series of photos. These were taken by one of my associates about an hour ago. Your husband and Richard Hayes at the Cascade Hotel. I swiped through the images. Daniel and Hayes entering the hotel, taking an elevator, emerging on what appeared to be a conference room level. The final photo showed them seated at a table with a third person whose face wasn't visible, just the back of a blonde head. Who's the third person? Not sure yet. My guy couldn't get a clear shot without being spotted, but I have someone watching the hotel exits. I set the phone down, mind racing. If Hayes is the architect, what's his endgame? 20 million. Is significant, but hardly worth risking his reputation and career. He's worth 10 times that amount. Bennett's expression darkened. That's what's been bothering me. The money might not be the primary objective. Have you looked into who owns the parcels adjacent to the East Side development? I frowned. Various property holders, some residential, some commercial. We approached several about acquisition during the planning phase, but the asking prices were prohibitive. Might be worth revisiting that research. In my experience, when development projects are sabotaged financially, it's often to drive down property values for future acquisition. The suggestion was troubling but made strategic sense. If the East Side project failed spectacularly, not only would Reynolds' development take a devastating blow, but surrounding properties would lose value, making them ripe for purchase by whoever orchestrated the failure. Maya, I called, pressing the intercom button. I need ownership records for all properties bordering the East Side development, particularly any that have changed hands in the past 18 months. On it, came the immediate response. Bennett moved toward the door. I should get back to analyzing the drive contents. There's a lot more to go through. What about Daniel's surveillance? Team's in place. He won't make a move without us knowing. Bennett paused. Mrs. Reynolds, Olivia, you should consider security for yourself. If Hayes is behind this and realizes you're investigating, he might not limit his response to financial maneuvers. The suggestion that I might be in physical danger seemed dramatic, but after the past 24 hours, I couldn't dismiss it entirely. I'll consider it. For now, I'm staying at the Avalon under a different name. Only Maya knows. Good. Keep it that way. He handed me a small device that resembled a thumb drive. Panic button. Press it twice, and my team responds immediately. Keep it with you. After Bennett left, I sat alone in my office, the weight of everything pressing down like a physical force. In less than a day, I'd discovered my husband's infidelity, uncovered potential fraud involving my company's largest project, and identified a man I'd considered a friend as the possible mastermind behind both betrayals. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel, his 20th since last night. Olivia, please. You don't understand what's happening. I need to explain. Meet me at our spot. 7 p.m. Our spot. The bench in Forest Park where he'd proposed 12 years ago, overlooking the city and river valley. We'd returned there on anniversaries after major life events, during moments of decision. That he would invoke it now, after everything, felt like one more violation. I was about to delete the message when another thought occurred. If Daniel was desperate enough, he might be willing to talk, perhaps even provide evidence against Hayes in exchange for leniency. It was a risk, but a calculated one. Can't meet tonight, I typed back. Tomorrow, noon. His response came immediately. Thank you, I'll explain everything, I promise. I set the phone down as Maya entered with a stack of documents. Property ownership records for the East Side adjacent parcels, she said, placing them on my desk. And you have a visitor. Sofia Garcia is in reception asking to see you. She seems agitated. Sofia's appearance was unexpected. Did she say why she's here? Just that it's urgent and related to what you discussed this morning. I considered refusing, but Sofia had already taken a significant risk bringing me the USB drive. Send her back. And Maya, I need you to contact Westlake Financial and request an emergency meeting of the East Side Project Oversight Committee for tomorrow morning. Tell them we've uncovered potential irregularities that require immediate discussion. You're going directly at them? Maya's surprise was evident. Sometimes the best defense is a strong offense. Hayes won't expect me to move this quickly. Sofia looked markedly different from our morning meeting. Her complexion pale, hair disheveled, eyes darting nervously as Maya escorted her into my office. She clutched her purse tightly against her body, knuckles white with tension. "Thank you for seeing me," she said as Maya closed the door behind her. "I wasn't sure you would." "You said it was urgent," I replied, gesturing to a chair. "What's happened?" Sophia remained standing. "They know about the USB drive, about our meeting this morning. Someone was watching us at the coffee shop." "How do you know this?" "Because when I returned to the office, there was a note on my desk." She reached into her purse, withdrawing a folded paper which she handed to me with trembling fingers. The message was simple, printed in standard font on plain paper. "Return what you took or face the consequences. Loyalty will be rewarded. Betrayal punished." "Did you tell anyone about our meeting? About the drive?" She shook her head vehemently. "No one." But when I got back to my desk, Richard Hayes was waiting in my department. He asked me to join a special task force reviewing the East Side project, said my attention to detail had been noted and appreciated. "He was fishing," I said, turning the note over in my hands. "Trying to determine how much you know and whether you can be brought into the fold." That's what I thought too. So, I accepted the position and acted grateful for the opportunity. Sophia finally sank into the chair as if her legs could no longer support her. Then on my lunch break, I discovered someone had been in my apartment. Nothing was taken, but things were moved, drawers left partially open. It was a message. The escalation was concerning. Hayes was clearly scrambling to contain potential leaks, which meant he felt vulnerable. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? Family, friends outside of Portland?" "My sister lives in Seattle. I could drive up after work." "Good. Go directly there from here. Don't return to your apartment or the office." I wrote down Bennett's contact information. "This is a private investigator I trust. Call him when you reach Seattle. Tell him I sent you. He'll make arrangements for your security until we determine next steps." Sophia took the paper, tucking it into her purse. "What about you? Daniel knows all your habits, your schedule, if he's involved in this scheme." "I've taken precautions." I studied her for a moment, assessing. "Sophia, I need to ask you something, and I need absolute honesty. Was your relationship with Daniel part of this scheme? Were you instructed to get close to him?" Her eyes widened, genuine shock registering on her face. "No, God, no, that was..." She flushed. "That was real, at least on my part. I know how it looks, but I genuinely believed Daniel when he said your marriage was over in all but name. I wasn't sure whether to find her naivety pathetic or endearing. Daniel's been lying to a lot of people about a lot of things. You're hardly the only one who believed him." "I never meant to hurt you," she said quietly. "When I realized what was happening with the East Side financials, I thought exposing it was the right thing to do, for my own conscience, and maybe as a way to make amends for the affair. I never imagined it would put us in danger." $20 million tends to make people dangerous, I replied, standing to signal the conversation was ending. "Go to your sisters. Contact Bennett when you arrive. And Sophia. Don't trust anyone connected to Westlake, especially Daniel. Whatever he felt for you was secondary to his loyalty to Hayes and this scheme." After Sophia left, I turned my attention to the property records Maya had gathered. Most seemed straightforward, a mix of long-term owners and recent purchasers, with no obvious connections to Hayes or Westlake. But 3 properties on the eastern boundary had changed hands in the past 5 months, all purchased by different limited liability companies that, upon closer inspection, shared the same registered agent, a law firm specializing in real estate transactions. I was making notes on these transactions when Maya buzzed again. Westlake confirmed the Oversight Committee meeting for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Hayes will attend personally. Perfect. And have you heard back from the auditors? They've completed the preliminary review. The discrepancies are significant, exactly as Bennett found. they've documented systematic inflation of contractor invoices, payments to vendors for services never rendered, and several large transfers to offshore holding companies. Email me their report. I want to review everything before tomorrow's meeting. Already done. Maya hesitated before adding, Olivia, the auditors noted that several of the irregular transactions required dual authorization, someone from Westlake and someone from Reynolds Development. The implication hung in the air between us. Someone here is involved? Potentially. The second authorizations came from an executive account, but there are inconsistencies with the digital signatures. They may have been forged. Another layer of betrayal to process. Have it check all executive access logs for the past 6 months. I want to know who accessed our financial systems outside of normal business hours. There's one more thing, Maya said, her expression grave. Daniel is downstairs in the lobby, demanding to see you. Security is holding him for now, but he's causing quite a scene. I was tempted to have security remove him from the premises, but a public confrontation would only feed the rumors already circulating. Have them escort him to the small conference room on this floor. No access to any other areas. I'll see him briefly. 5 minutes later, I stood outside the conference room, steeling myself for the first face-to-face conversation with my husband since walking away from him at the summit. Through the glass panel, I could see Daniel pacing, running his hands through his hair. A gesture of agitation I'd witnessed countless times during our marriage, usually before major presentations or difficult client meetings. He looked up as I entered, relief washing over his features. Olivia, thank God. You haven't been answering my calls. Because I have nothing to say to you, I interrupted, remaining near the door. You have 5 minutes, Daniel. Use them wisely. This isn't what you think, he began, taking a step toward me before stopping when I held up a hand. The East Side project, the financial issues. I was trying to fix things, not make them worse. By embezzling $20 million? By having an affair with a junior analyst? Those were your solutions? His face paled. How did you... He caught himself. Sophia told you about the financial discrepancies. Sophia told me many things, as did the USB drive she provided, which documented your correspondence with the architect. Or should I just call him Richard Hayes? Daniel sank into a chair, the confident facade crumbling entirely. You don't understand the position I was in. Hayes approached me 8 months ago, said there were concerns about the East Side financing structure. He suggested adjustments to protect Westlake's investment, just minor reallocations at first. By the time I realized what was really happening, I was already implicated. So rather than come to me, rather than go to the authorities, you decided to betray everything we built together? To lie to my face daily while sabotaging my company's most important project? I was trying to protect you. His voice rose before he caught himself, glancing toward the glass panel. Hayes has connections, powerful ones. When I threatened to expose the scheme, he made it clear that Reynolds Development would be destroyed in the process. Your reputation ruined, your financial backing evaporated. I thought if I could just manage the situation, find evidence against Hayes without implicating myself or the company. And Sophia? Was she part of your protection strategy too? Daniel had the grace to look ashamed. That was a mistake. A moment of weakness that became something else. She was assigned to the East Side account. We started working late hours. One thing led to another. I never meant for it to happen. You never meant for me to find out, I corrected. There's a significant difference. Olivia, please. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but you have to believe me. Hayes is dangerous. The money is just part of a larger plan. He's been acquiring properties around the East Side development through shell companies. If the project fails, if Reynolds Development is implicated in financial fraud, those properties will be worth pennies on the dollar. And then Hayes swoops in, buys the distressed East Side property at auction, combines it with his surrounding parcels, and develops a much larger project, one that wouldn't have received city approval as a single entity due to density concerns. Daniel blinked in surprise. You figured it out. Unlike you, I don't underestimate my wife's intelligence. I checked my watch. Your 5 minutes are up. Security will escort you from the building. Wait. Daniel stood abruptly. I can help you. I have evidence against Hayes. Documents, recordings of conversations, things Sophia doesn't have access to. And you're offering these out of the goodness of your heart? Or to save yourself? Both, he admitted. I'm meeting Hayes again tomorrow morning before the Oversight Committee meeting. He's nervous, making mistakes. I can wear a wire, get him to incriminate himself directly. The offer was tempting, but fraught with risk. Why should I trust you now? Because despite everything, I do love you, Olivia. And because I'm the only one who can get close enough to Hayes to get what you need. I studied my husband's face, the face I'd woken up beside for 12 years, the face I'd thought I knew better than my own. What I saw now was desperation mixed with genuine fear, but also determination. Whether it stemmed from self-preservation or actual remorse was impossible to determine. I'll consider it, I said finally. Go to the meeting with Hayes as planned. I'll have someone contact you afterward with instructions if I decide to proceed. Relief washed over his features. Thank you. You won't regret this. I already regret every decision that led us here, Daniel. Don't mistake practicality for forgiveness. After security escorted him from the building, I returned to my office where Bennett was waiting, having observed the entire exchange through the security feed. You handled that well, he commented. Think he's sincere about helping? Sincere about saving himself, certainly. I sank into my chair, suddenly exhausted. But he might be useful. Hayes trusts him, at least enough to keep meeting with him. Bennett nodded. A wire's risky. Hayes will be paranoid, possibly checking for recording devices. I'm not suggesting we actually do it, but Daniel believing we might gives us options. I turned to my computer, pulling up the auditor's report. Let's focus on what we know for certain. Hayes is acquiring properties surrounding the development. The East Side project has been systematically drained of funds. Someone within Reynolds Development has been helping facilitate the fraud, whether knowingly or through compromised credentials. And the Portland Business Journal is about to publicize compliance issues with the project, potentially tanking your company's stock before you can get ahead of the story. I had almost forgotten that detail in the flood of revelations. We need to move faster than Hayes anticipates. The Oversight Committee meeting tomorrow is our opportunity to flip the script. Bennett raised an eyebrow. You're not actually planning to attend? After what we've discovered, that seems like walking into the lion's den. Sometimes the lion is most dangerous when cornered in his den, I replied. And sometimes that's exactly where you need him to be, surrounded, with nowhere to run. For the next several hours, Bennett and I developed a strategy that was equal parts business acumen and investigative tactics. By the time darkness fell over Portland, I had a comprehensive battle plan for the morning's confrontation. All the key players would be present: Hayes, Daniel, the Oversight Committee members. The stage was set for a reckoning. As I prepared to leave for the Avalon, Maya appeared one last time. Security sweeps are complete. All executive access credentials have been reset except yours, and this just arrived by courier. She handed me a small envelope, unmarked except for my name. Inside was a single key card and a handwritten note. The truth isn't what you think. Pacific Room, Cascade Hotel, 10 p.m. tonight. Come alone if you want the full story. The handwriting wasn't Daniel's, nor was it Sophia's based on the note I'd seen earlier. This was someone else. Someone who knew enough to be cryptic but specific. Interesting timing, Bennett remarked when I showed him. The Pacific Room is one of the Cascade's private dining areas, often used for discreet business meetings. It could be a trap, I said, turning the keycard over in my hands. Hayes trying to lure me somewhere private. Or it could be someone with insider information who's afraid to come forward publicly. Bennett took the card, examining it. I can have a team in place, monitoring the hotel entrances and exits. You go in, we watch remotely. First sign of trouble, we intervene. I considered the risks. Walking into an unknown situation felt dangerous, but the potential information gain could be crucial for tomorrow's confrontation. Set it up, but I want a direct line to you the entire time. Bennett nodded. Wear the panic button. And Olivia, trust no one tonight, not even someone who appears to be an ally. As I left Reynolds Development through the private exit, the weight of that warning settled heavily on my shoulders. In less than 24 hours, every relationship I'd trusted had been revealed as potentially compromised. My husband, my business associates, perhaps even colleagues within my own company. The only person I could rely on completely was myself. And as I slipped into the waiting car that would take me to this mysterious meeting, I made a silent promise. Whoever was behind the destruction of my marriage and the attempted sabotage of my company would face justice, not just legal consequences, but the full measure of my focused retribution. Because while they had clearly studied me enough to orchestrate this elaborate scheme, they had missed one crucial detail. I hadn't built Reynolds Development from nothing by backing down from challenges. I'd done it by turning threats into opportunities and adversaries into cautionary tales. Tonight, I would discover who had authored this conspiracy. Tomorrow, I would begin writing its conclusion. Portland's evening traffic moved sluggishly through a light drizzle as my driver navigated toward the Cascade Hotel. The city lights reflected off wet pavement, creating shimmering patterns that matched my unsettled thoughts. Bennett had arranged for a nondescript sedan rather than my usual car service, another layer of precaution in a day that had redefined my understanding of necessary vigilance. We'll be arriving in approximately 5 minutes, Mrs. Reynolds, the driver announced, meeting my eyes briefly in the rearview mirror. He was one of Bennett's people, a former military intelligence officer according to the brief introduction we'd shared. The team is already in position around the hotel. I nodded, feeling the weight of the panic button in my jacket pocket. Bennett had equipped me with an inconspicuous earpiece as well, allowing him to communicate with me throughout the meeting. The setup made me feel like a character in one of those espionage thrillers Daniel had always enjoyed. An irony not lost on me considering my husband's actual role in this unfolding drama. The Cascade Hotel stood 14 stories tall in Portland's cultural district, its Art Deco facade illuminated by carefully positioned lights that emphasized its historical significance. I'd attended countless charity functions and business meetings within its walls over the years. Daniel and I had even spent our first anniversary in its presidential suite, back when we were still building our careers, and such extravagance felt meaningful rather than routine. Now I saw it with new eyes, not as a landmark of Portland sophistication, but as the location where my husband had conducted his affair, where Hayes had likely orchestrated the scheme to undermine my company, and where I was about to meet an unknown informant who might provide the final pieces of this increasingly complex puzzle. We've confirmed the Pacific Room is booked under Westlake Financial for a private dinner. Bennett's voice came through my earpiece as the car pulled up to the hotel's side entrance. No names on the reservation, just the company credit card. Security cameras show the room has been accessed once in the past hour, but we couldn't get a clear image of who entered. Any sign of Hayes or Daniel? I asked quietly. Negative. Neither has been spotted entering the hotel, but the back entrance has limited camera coverage. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out into the misting rain. I'm going in. Keep the line open. The side entrance led directly to the elevator bank, allowing me to bypass the main lobby. I swiped the keycard in the elevator, and it automatically selected the 9th floor where the hotel's private dining rooms were located. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of one of Bennett's team members taking a position near the hotel bar, casually dressed but alert. The 9th floor corridor was hushed, thick carpeting absorbing the sound of my footsteps as I followed the discreet signage toward the Pacific room. My heartbeat quickened despite my efforts to maintain composure. I had faced countless high stakes, negotiations and business confrontations, but never one where the personal and professional stakes were so inextricably entangled. Outside the Pacific room's double doors, I paused, adjusting my blazer and squaring my shoulders. The keycard slid smoothly into the reader, and a soft click indicated the door had unlocked. I pushed it open, unsure what, or who, awaited me inside. The Pacific room was one of the hotel's smaller private dining areas, designed to accommodate intimate gatherings of up to 12 people. A single table had been set near the windows overlooking the city, illuminated by the soft glow of candles rather than the overhead lighting. A bottle of wine breathed in a crystal decanter, 2 glasses arranged beside it. And rising from a chair at the far side of the table was Elise Harlow, Chief Financial Officer of Westlake Financial and Richard Hayes's most trusted lieutenant. "Olivia," she greeted me, her voice carrying that distinctive Southern cadence that 20 years in Portland had failed to erase. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." Of all the people I might have expected, Elise ranked low on the list. In her mid-50s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into an immaculate chignon, she had a reputation for fierce loyalty to Westlake in general, and Hayes in particular. She had been with the firm for nearly 3 decades, rising from junior accountant to CFO through a combination of financial brilliance and political savvy. "Elise," I acknowledged, remaining near the door. "I admit, you're not who I expected to find here." A tight smile crossed her face as she gestured to the chair opposite her. "I imagine not. Please sit. I promise this isn't a trap. Quite the opposite, in fact." "You'll understand if I'm hesitant to take anything at face value these days," I replied, but moved toward the table nonetheless. The panic button remained within easy reach in my pocket. A reasonable position, given the circumstances. Elise resumed her seat, folding her hands on the table. "I understand you've had quite an educational 24 hours. The deliberate understatement almost made me laugh. That's one way to describe discovering your husband's affair and a $20 million fraud scheme targeting your company. And now you believe Richard Hayes is the mastermind behind both." It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. Elise reached for the wine decanter, pouring a small amount into each glass. "What if I told you that's only partially correct?" I made no move toward the wine. "I'd say you have approximately 10 minutes to explain before I walk out of here, and proceed with tomorrow's Oversight Committee meeting exactly as planned." Elise took a sip from her glass, her expression unreadable. "Fair enough. Let me be direct then. Richard Hayes is indeed involved in the financial irregularities with the East Side project, but he's not the architect of the scheme. He's being manipulated by someone else, someone who recognized his financial vulnerability and exploited it. Hayes is worth millions." "What vulnerability?" "Was worth millions," Elise corrected. 3 failed marriages with punitive settlements, a gambling problem he's managed to keep private, and a spectacularly ill-advised investment in a cryptocurrency venture that collapsed last year. Richard is leveraged to his eyeballs and drowning, in debt that would destroy his reputation if it became public. The revelation was surprising, but not entirely shocking. Many of Portland's financial elite lived beyond their means, maintaining appearances while balancing on increasingly precarious financial foundations. "And you know this how?" I asked. "Because I've been covering for him for the past 18 months, Elise admitted. Restructuring loans, arranging private financing, keeping the board in the dark about his personal financial disasters. I believed I was protecting Westlake from unnecessary disruption while giving Richard time to recover. Until you discovered, He was embezzling from client projects. Elise's expression hardened. I didn't discover it. I was deliberately shown evidence of it 6 months ago by an anonymous source. Someone who made it clear they would expose Richard's activities and my complicity in covering up his financial problems, unless I cooperated with certain adjustments to the East Side project financing. Blackmail, I said, the pieces beginning to shift in my mind. So Hayes isn't the architect after all. He's another pawn, like Daniel. Richard is many things. Arrogant, reckless with his personal finances, occasionally ethically flexible. But he's not a thief by nature, Elise said. He became one out of desperation and fear. Which doesn't explain why you're telling me this now, I pointed out. You could have come forward months ago, before $20 million disappeared from my project. Elise's composed facade cracked slightly, genuine distress showing through. Because until yesterday, I believed the situation was containable. The adjustments seemed designed to delay the project rather than destroy it. The diverted funds were being held in identifiable accounts, theoretically recoverable once certain conditions were met. But now, she shook her head. Now it's spiraling beyond anyone's control. What changed yesterday? 2 things. First, the money started moving again, not just being diverted but actively dispersed through channels that make recovery nearly impossible. And second, I received this. She slid a folded paper across the table. It was another printed note, similar to the one Sophia had received, but with a different message. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Evidence is in place. Sacrifices will be made. Sacrifices, I repeated, the word hanging ominously between us. Are we talking about financial sacrifices or something more sinister? That's why I contacted you, Elise said, leaning forward. I believe whoever is orchestrating this intends to ensure Richard takes the fall completely. The Oversight Committee meeting tomorrow isn't just about exposing financial irregularities. It's a trap designed to publicly implicate Richard while insulating the real mastermind. And you think I'm walking into this trap alongside Hayes? I think you're being positioned as either a co-conspirator or an incompetent leader who failed to notice massive fraud within her own project, Elise confirmed. Either way, Reynolds. Development suffers irreparable damage, the East Side project collapses, and someone benefits tremendously from the aftermath. I thought of Bennett's theory about the surrounding properties. Someone who's been acquiring adjacent parcels through shell companies. Elise's eyebrows rose slightly. You've done your homework. Yes, though I only discovered that connection recently myself. Do you know who's behind it? I asked. Who's been blackmailing Hayes and manipulating the situation? Elise hesitated, glancing toward the window where Portland's skyline glittered through the rain-streaked glass. I have suspicions, but no concrete proof. The communications are always anonymous, the financial trails deliberately complex. But you have a name in mind, I pressed. Several, actually. She reached into her handbag, withdrawing a slim flash drive which she placed beside the note. This contains everything I've gathered. The original evidence I was sent about. Richard, the communication trails, the financial transfers I've been forced to authorize. I've been documenting everything from the beginning, as insurance. Insurance that's suddenly become valuable enough to risk sharing, I observed, making no move to take the drive. Why should I trust any of this, Elise? For all I know, you're setting me up as part of whatever endgame is planned for tomorrow. Because I've worked at Westlake for 28 years, she replied, a flash of genuine emotion breaking through her careful composure. I've dedicated my life to building that firm's reputation. I made a terrible mistake protecting Richard, but I won't be complicit in destroying client companies or people's lives. That's a line I won't cross. The earnestness in her voice seemed authentic, but I'd learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. Bennett, I said quietly, knowing he could hear through the earpiece. "What's your read on this?" "Appears genuine," his voice responded in my ear. Body language is consistent with someone under stress but telling the truth as they understand it. The drive could still be compromised, though. We'll need to isolate it before accessing. I reached for the flash drive, pocketing it alongside the panic button. "Let's assume for a moment I believe you. What exactly are you proposing?" "The oversight committee meeting is in 12 hours. "Cancel it," Elise said immediately. "Cite new information that requires further investigation. That gives us time to analyze what I've provided and identify who's actually pulling the strings." "Delay would only alert the mastermind that something's changed," I countered. "Whatever evidence has been planted, whatever sacrifices are planned, postponing won't eliminate the threat. It will just change the timeline." "Then what do you suggest?" Elise asked, genuine curiosity in her tone. "We proceed exactly as planned," I said, the outline of a strategy forming in my mind. "But we control the narrative. You mentioned evidence being planted. We need to know what that evidence is and who it implicates before walking into that meeting." "I've been trying to determine that, but access to Richard's private communications is limited, even for me." "Then we need someone closer to Hayes," I said, thinking of Daniel's offer to wear a wire. "Someone he trusts with sensitive information." Understanding dawned in Elise's eyes. "Your husband. Daniel claims he wants to help expose Hayes. If he's sincere, he may be our best avenue to discovering what's planned for tomorrow." Elise considered this, swirling the wine in her glass thoughtfully. "It's risky. If Daniel is playing both sides, then we'll know soon enough," I interrupted. "But we need to move quickly. Hayes is meeting with Daniel in the morning before the oversight committee. That's our opportunity." A soft knock at the door interrupted our conversation. Through the earpiece, Bennett's voice was suddenly alert. "Security breach. Someone's approaching the room who isn't hotel staff." Elise looked alarmed. "Are you expecting someone else?" I shook my head, rising from my chair and moving toward the side of the room away from the door. "Who is it?" I asked Bennett quietly. "Male, mid-40s, business attire. He's using a keycard. It's your husband." "Daniel." How had he known about this meeting? Had he followed me? Or was he working with Elise all along? The door opened, and Daniel stepped inside, freezing when he saw both of us. His expression cycled rapidly through surprise, confusion, and something that looked almost like relief. "Olivia," he said, then noticed Elise. "And Elise, I see you've made contact already." Elise stood, her posture stiffening. "Daniel, this is unexpected. How did you know about our meeting?" "I didn't exactly," he admitted, closing the door behind him. "I've been monitoring the Cascades reservation system since this morning, looking for unusual bookings. When I saw the Pacific room reserved under Westlake's account but not through Hayes' assistant, I got curious." He turned to me. "I was worried about you, Olivia. After our conversation this afternoon, I was afraid you might do something rash." "Like meet with potential conspirators in an isolated location?" I asked dryly. "Like confront Hayes without backup," Daniel corrected. He looked between us. "So you two are comparing notes. Good. We'll need a unified approach for tomorrow." "We haven't agreed to any unified approach yet," I pointed out. "And your appearance here raises more questions than it answers. How convenient that you happened to be monitoring hotel reservations on the exact day Elise reached out to me." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair in that familiar gesture of frustration. "I've been monitoring everything related to the East Side project for weeks, trying to gather enough evidence against Hayes without implicating myself beyond repair. When things accelerated after last night, I intensified my efforts. After you brought your girlfriend to our anniversary dinner, you mean?" I clarified, unable to keep the edge from my voice despite the larger issues at stake. A flash of genuine remorse crossed his face. I never intended for that to happen. Sophia wasn't supposed to be there. I had actually planned to tell you everything last night. About Hayes, about the financial manipulations, all of it. I'd finally gathered enough evidence to prove Hayes was behind everything. Then why didn't you? Elise asked, watching him carefully. Because Hayes changed the meeting location at the last minute, insisted Sophia join us to review some projections. I couldn't figure out how to exclude her without raising suspicions. Daniel's gaze met mine. By the time I realized we were heading to the summit, it was too late to warn you or create an excuse. I thought I could still control the situation somehow. The explanation was plausible, but conveniently aligned with making Daniel appear more victim than perpetrator. And I'm supposed to believe that your affair with Sophia was just collateral damage in your heroic undercover operation. Daniel winced. No, that was a terrible mistake. One I can't justify or explain away. I was under immense pressure, making bad decisions in every aspect of my life. Sophia was assigned to work closely with me on the East Side manipulations. One thing led to another. He shook his head. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Olivia. Just a chance to help fix the financial disaster before it destroys everything you've built. I studied my husband's face, searching for signs of deception. After 12 years together, I'd believed I could read him perfectly, yet I'd missed months of lies and betrayal. How could I trust my judgment of him now? Bennett, I said quietly. Assessment? Partial truths at best, came the response, in my ear. He's holding something back, but the remorse seems genuine. Proceed with caution. Elise glanced between us. Perhaps we should focus on the immediate threat. The Oversight Committee meets in less than 12 hours. Whatever sacrifices are planned will happen then. Sacrifices? Daniel asked sharply. What are you talking about? Elise explained about the note she'd received and her theory that Hayes was being set up to take the fall completely. Daniel listened intently, his expression growing increasingly troubled. That aligns with something I overheard yesterday, he said when she finished. Hayes was on the phone in his office, door partially open. He was agitated, saying something about, "This wasn't the agreement, and I won't be the only one held responsible." When he saw me, he ended the call immediately. Did you hear who he was speaking with? I asked. Daniel shook his head. But afterward, he asked me to ensure all the Eastside documentation for tomorrow's meeting came only from the approved files. His exact words. When I asked about the standard financial reports, he said they'd been updated and I should destroy any previous versions I might have. Doctored evidence, Elise murmured. Creating a paper trail that implicates specific people while hiding others. Exactly, Daniel agreed. I've been trying to access these approved files to see what's been changed, but Hayes is keeping them close. They're on an encrypted drive he carries with him. The pieces were starting to form a clearer picture, though the central question remained, who was orchestrating everything from the shadows? Who stood to benefit most from the destruction of both Hayes and Reynolds' development? We need to see those files before the meeting, I said decisively. Daniel, you said Hayes is meeting with you in the morning. Where and when? His office, 7:30 a.m., 2 hours before the Oversight Committee. That's our window, I said, looking between them. Daniel, you'll need to get Hayes away from that drive long enough for us to access it. And how exactly am I supposed to do that? He asked. You'll suggest breakfast at the restaurant across from Westlake's offices, I replied. Say you want to review strategy for the meeting away from potential interruptions. Bennett's team will access Hayes' office during that window. Breaking into the office of one of Portland's most prominent financial firms seems extreme, Elise cautioned. The security implications alone. We don't need to break in, I interrupted. We just need access. And as CFO, you have that access, don't you, Elise? She hesitated before nodding. Yes, though accessing his private office without authorization would violate company policy. I think we're well beyond worrying about policy violations at this point, I pointed out. $20 million has been stolen, and someone is orchestrating a scheme that will likely destroy multiple careers and companies tomorrow. Extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary measures. Daniel was watching me with something like admiration. You've changed, Olivia. 24 hours ago, you would have insisted on following proper protocols, legal channels. 24 hours ago, I believed my husband was faithful and my business partners were honest. I replied evenly. Adaptation is a survival skill. The three of us spent the next hour developing a detailed plan for the morning. How Daniel would lure Hayes away from his office, how Elise would provide access to Bennett's team, what evidence we needed to secure before the Oversight Committee meeting. Throughout the discussion, I maintained a careful emotional distance, treating Daniel and Elise as tactical assets rather than people with whom I shared personal history. As we prepared to leave, Daniel caught my arm gently. Olivia, where are you staying tonight? I'm concerned about your safety, especially if whoever is behind this realizes we're coordinating. I removed his hand from my arm. That's not your concern anymore, Daniel. At least take this, he said, offering a small thumb drive. It's everything I've gathered on Hayes so far. Financial records, communications I've managed to document. It's not enough to expose the mastermind, but it helps establish the timeline of Hayes' involvement. I accepted the drive without comment, adding it to my pocket alongside Elise's. Two potential pieces of the puzzle, both from sources I couldn't fully trust. Outside the hotel, Bennett was waiting in the same nondescript sedan. All clear, he confirmed as I slid into the back seat. Though I'm not thrilled about your husband's convenient appearance. Neither am I admitted. But we're running out of options and time. Did your team catch the conversation? Every word. I've already started preparations for the morning operation. Bennett glanced at me in the rearview mirror. You're taking significant risks, Olivia. Trusting Daniel and Elise, even partially, could backfire spectacularly. I'm not trusting them, I clarified. I'm using them. There's a difference. Bennett's expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced by the distinction. And if they're using you in return? It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself throughout the meeting. Then we'll discover that tomorrow, won't we? But I'm not walking into anything blindly. I have contingencies in place. Care to share those contingencies? Bennett asked. Not all of them, I replied, watching Portland's rain-slicked streets pass by. But I will need your help with something specific tonight. I need to access Reynolds Development's secure server remotely, without triggering any security notifications. Bennett's eyebrows rose. That's not standard procedure for my firm. Neither is corporate espionage or embezzlement, yet here we are. I need to verify something in our backup archives, something that might identify our mystery architect. After a moment's consideration, Bennett nodded. I have someone who can help with that, discreetly. Good. Because tomorrow morning, before the Oversight Committee meeting, I intend to have every piece of this puzzle in place. I met his eyes in the mirror, and whoever orchestrated this scheme is going to discover exactly why attacking Reynolds Development was the worst decision they ever made. Back at the Avalon, I spent hours reviewing the contents of both flash drives Bennett's tech specialist had provided, Elise's extensive documentation of Hayes' financial troubles and the blackmail she'd experienced, and Daniel's more limited but still valuable collection of communications and financial records. Cross-referencing the information revealed a clearer timeline. Hayes' financial collapse had begun approximately 2 years earlier, with gambling debts and investment losses accelerating about 18 months ago. Elise had begun covering for him shortly thereafter, restructuring company loans and creating financial cushions to hide his personal disasters from the board. The pressure on Hayes had intensified around the time the East Side project financing was being arranged. Someone had recognized his vulnerability and begun exploiting it, first through seemingly legitimate financial adjustments to the project, then progressing to more explicit fraud as Hayes became more deeply implicated. Daniel had been brought into the scheme 8 months ago, selected by Hayes because of his relationship to me and his intimate knowledge of Reynolds Development's financial systems. The affair with Sophia had begun 2 months later, whether by design or coincidence remained unclear. But the most interesting discovery came through the remote access to Reynolds Development's archives. With Bennett's specialist's help, I was able to examine the security logs for our financial systems over the past year. Daniel's credentials had indeed been used multiple times to access sensitive East Side project data outside normal business hours. But so had another executive account, one belonging to a person I'd never suspected until this moment. The revelation sent a chill through me, even as the final pieces clicked into place. The property acquisitions surrounding the East Side development, the strategic leaking of compliance issues to the Portland Business Journal, the carefully orchestrated pressure on both Hayes and Daniel. It all pointed to someone with intimate knowledge of the project, significant financial resources, and a powerful motivation to see Reynolds Development fail. Someone who had been hiding in plain sight all along. As dawn broke over Portland, I gathered the evidence I'd compiled overnight and prepared for the confrontation ahead. The Oversight Committee meeting was still scheduled for 9 a.m., but thanks to our midnight planning session, several key pieces would be in motion well before then. Daniel would be meeting Hayes for breakfast at 7:30, creating the window for Bennett's team to access the encrypted files. Elise would be providing security clearance and monitoring for any unexpected complications at Westlake's offices. And I would be making one crucial stop before the committee meeting, a conversation that would either confirm my suspicions or send us back to square one in identifying the mastermind behind everything. "Are you certain about this approach?" Bennett asked as we reviewed the final details of the morning's operation. "There are significant risks, especially if your identification of the architect is correct." "I'm certain that tomorrow's Oversight Committee meeting was designed as the kill switch for this entire scheme," I replied. "If we wait, if we try to build a more comprehensive case through official channels, Reynolds Development will be destroyed in the process. I've spent 15 years building this company. I won't watch it burn because of someone else's greed and manipulation." Bennett studied me for a moment, then nodded. "For what it's worth, I think Daniel was right about one thing. You have changed in the past 24 hours. "Not changed," I corrected, gathering my materials for the day ahead. "Evolved. Adaptation isn't just a survival skill in business. Sometimes it's the only way to turn a devastating setback into an opportunity for justice." As I prepared to leave the hotel room that had been my sanctuary since fleeing my anniversary dinner, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman, who stared back, bore little resemblance to the one who had carefully selected an emerald dress just 2 evenings ago, anticipating a celebration of 12 years with a man she thought she knew. This woman's eyes held a clarity born of painful truths. Her posture embodied a resolve tempered by betrayal. She had lost a husband but found a strength she hadn't known she possessed. And in less than 2 hours, she would confront the true architect of her suffering. Not just to save her company, but to ensure that the price of betrayal was paid in full. The morning air carried an unusual crispness for October in Portland. As if the city itself was holding its breath in anticipation, I stood outside the glass headquarters of Westlake Financial, watching early light reflect off the windows while waiting for Bennett's confirmation that Daniel had successfully lured Hayes away from his office. My phone vibrated precisely at 7:35 a.m. "Target in motion," Bennett's text read. "Subject and your husband heading to Perkins Cafe as planned. Window open approximately 45 minutes. I responded with a simple, "Proceeding," before slipping my phone back into my blazer pocket. The weight of the evidence I'd compiled overnight pressed against me from my briefcase. Documents, financial records, security logs, and most damningly, the connections I discovered when all the pieces were finally assembled. The security guard at Westlake's reception desk recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Reynolds, good morning. You're here early for the Oversight Committee." "I have a preliminary meeting with Elise Harlow," I replied smoothly. "She's expecting me." "Of course. I'll let her know you're here." Within moments, Elise appeared in the lobby, her expression carefully neutral for the benefit of any observers. "Olivia, thank you for coming early. Let's head up to the conference room to prepare." In the elevator, once the doors closed, her professional mask slipped slightly. "Bennett's team is in position. They've accessed Hayes' office and are working on the encrypted drive now." "Any complications?" "Not yet, though Hayes took his laptop with him to breakfast. The standalone drive was in his desk safe, exactly where he usually keeps it." "And your team members? Any unusual behavior this morning?" Elise shook her head. "Nothing obvious, though everyone's tense about the committee meeting. The rumors about financial irregularities have spread throughout the firm." The elevator doors opened onto Westlake's executive floor, and Elise led me not toward the conference room, but to her own office, a corner space with impressive views of Mount Hood in the distance. Once inside, she closed the door and activated a privacy setting that frosted the glass walls. "Bennett's people should be finished within 15 minutes, she said, checking her watch. "Hayes never stays away from the office for more than an hour before a major meeting. He's almost pathologically attached to his preparation rituals." I set my briefcase on her desk, opening it to reveal the organized evidence inside. "I've been connecting dots all night. The picture that's emerging is unexpected." Elise raised an eyebrow. "You've identified the architect?" "I believe so," I replied, removing a specific folder. "But I need confirmation from the encrypted files before making my final move." My phone buzzed again. Bennett, with an image. Attachment. The message was brief. "Files accessed. Sending key documents now. Full download complete in 3 minutes." The image showed an email from Hayes to an unnamed recipient, dated 6 months ago. The content was damning. "I've implemented the changes to the Reynolds documentation as instructed. The financial adjustments appear routine, but they've created the vulnerabilities you specified. No one at Reynolds Development or the Oversight Committee will notice until it's too late." Elise read the message over my shoulder, her breath catching. "This confirms Hayes was taking direct instructions from someone else." "Yes, but it doesn't." "Identify who?" I swiped to the next image Bennett had sent, a spreadsheet showing property acquisitions around the East Side development, all purchased through different shell companies, but with a common thread I'd discovered overnight. "These properties," I said, pointing to 3 specific parcels, "were all acquired using funds traced back to a holding company called Artemis Ventures." "I've never heard of them," Elise admitted. "Few people have. It's a private investment. Vehicle created approximately 2 years ago, specializing in distressed real estate acquisitions." I pulled up another document. "What's interesting is the timing. Artemis was formed just weeks after Hayes began experiencing his financial difficulties." Elise frowned. "You think whoever created Artemis deliberately targeted Hayes? Set up his financial collapse?" "I think Hayes' gambling problems and investment losses made him vulnerable, and someone recognized that vulnerability as an opportunity." I laid out the timeline I'd constructed overnight. First, they pushed him deeper into financial trouble through some strategic investment opportunities that were designed to fail. Then, once he was desperate enough, they offered a solution: help manipulate the East Side financing, and his problems would disappear. And when he was sufficiently compromised, they escalated to outright fraud, Elise concluded. But who would have that level of insight into Richard's personal finances? That kind of strategic patience? My phone buzzed again. Bennett's team had completed their download of Hayes' encrypted files and were exiting the building through a service entrance. We had perhaps 15 minutes before Hayes would likely return from breakfast with Daniel. I opened the new files Bennett had sent, scanning quickly for the final confirmation I needed. And there it was. A series of communications between Hayes and an email account that, while anonymous on its face, contained digital metadata I'd seen before. "I know who the architect is," I said, turning the screen toward Elise. "And I'm about to confront them." Elise's eyes widened as she processed the information. I never suspected. Are you sure?" "Absolutely." I gathered my evidence back into my briefcase. "The Oversight Committee meets in less than an hour. I need you to do exactly as we discussed last night. Ensure all the committee members receive copies of the true financial documentation, not Hayes's doctored versions." "And what about you? Where are you going?" "To have a conversation?" "That's long overdue." I checked my watch. "If I'm not back in time for the start of the meeting, stall however necessary. This won't take long." The journey to my destination took only 12 minutes, but each one seemed to stretch with the weight of what I was about to do. Portland's morning traffic flowed around my car, people heading to ordinary workdays while I prepared to confront the extraordinary betrayal that had been hiding in plain sight. Reynolds Development's headquarters was already bustling with activity when I arrived. Employees nodded respectfully as I crossed the lobby, none aware of the storm about to break. I bypassed my own office, heading instead to the floor below, where finance and operations were housed. Maya intercepted me near the elevators, tablet in hand. "Olivia, you're back. I was worried when you didn't come in yesterday afternoon." "I had some personal matters to attend to," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Is everyone in their offices this morning?" "Yes, though Grant mentioned he might be leaving early for a property viewing." Maya glanced at her tablet. "He's scheduled to be at the Oversight Committee meeting first, though." "Perfect. I need to see him now. Is he alone?" "As far as I know." Maya studied my face, clearly sensing something significant was happening. "Olivia, is everything all right? There are rumors circulating about the East Side project." "Everything will be clear very soon," I assured her. "For now, I need 10 minutes of uninterrupted time with Grant. No calls, no interruptions." Maya nodded, her loyalty unquestioning despite her obvious concerns. "Of course." Grant Lawson's office occupied a prime corner of the operations floor, not as large as mine, but with impressive views nonetheless. As chief operating officer, he'd been with Reynolds Development almost from the beginning, helping transform my architectural vision into practical reality across dozens of projects. We'd weathered market downturns, regulatory challenges, and construction disasters together. I'd trusted him completely. That trust had been my blind spot. He looked up from his computer as I entered, a smile spreading across his handsome face. At 53, Grant carried himself with the confidence of a man who knew his value. Silver threading through his dark hair, laugh lines framing eyes that had always seemed kind and insightful. "Olivia, there you are. I was getting worried. When no one could reach you yesterday." He rose from his desk, concern apparent in his expression. "I heard about what happened at your anniversary dinner. Daniel's showing up with that analyst. It's unconscionable." I closed his office door behind me. "Is it, Grant? I would have thought you'd appreciate the dramatic irony of the situation." His smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" "Please, let's not waste time with pretense." I set my briefcase on his desk, opening it to reveal the carefully organized evidence. Artemis Ventures, the shell companies acquiring properties around the East Side development, the systematic sabotage of the project financing, the anonymous instructions to Hayes, and the blackmail of Elise Harlow. I looked directly into his eyes. "Or should I call you the architect?" The transformation in Grant's expression was subtle but unmistakable, the concern melting away, replaced by something cooler, more calculating. He didn't immediately deny the accusation, which was confirmation in itself. "You've been busy," he observed, returning to his chair with deliberate calm. "Though I'm not sure what you think you've discovered beyond some business connections that would exist in any real estate market as small as Portland's." "Don't insult my intelligence, Grant. It doesn't suit you." I removed the email metadata, evidence, placing it on his desk. The anonymous account communicating with Hayes shares digital signatures with emails sent from your personal devices. The shell companies acquiring properties around Eastside all trace back to Artemis Ventures, which you established 22 months ago using your mother's maiden name in the registration documents. His expression remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Circumstantial connections at best. Perhaps. But there's more. I laid out the timeline I'd constructed overnight. 2 years ago, you approached Hayes about personal investment opportunities, knowing his tendency toward financial risk-taking. Those investments failed catastrophically, by design. Once Hayes was financially vulnerable, you used that leverage to manipulate him into helping sabotage the Eastside project. "That's quite a theory," Grant said, leaning back in his chair with forced casualness. "But why would I sabotage my own company's flagship project? I've invested years in Reynolds development." "Because you never intended it to be your company," I replied. "You wanted it to be your project. 15 years watching me build something you believed should have been yours. 15 years playing the loyal lieutenant while believing you deserved the crown." A flicker of something dark passed behind his eyes. "You always did undervalue my contributions, Olivia. Who do you think made your architectural pipe dreams into viable developments? Who navigated the regulatory mazes, managed the construction teams, solved the logistical nightmares? You got the accolades, the magazine covers, the industry awards. I got meetings with city planners and arguments with contractors. So this was about resentment? 15 years of partnership destroyed because you wanted more recognition?" Grant laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "This isn't about recognition. It's about value. The Eastside project in its current form is worth approximately $120 million upon completion. But the expanded development I've designed, incorporating the surrounding properties, close to $500 million. The scale of his ambition was staggering. So you sabotage Eastside, Reynolds' development collapses under the fraud scandal, and you swoop in with Artemis Ventures to acquire everything at pennies on the dollar. Simplified, but essentially correct. Grant's pretense of denial had evaporated, replaced by a cold pragmatism that seemed alien on the face of a man I'd considered a friend. It's just business, Olivia, the kind of strategic thinking you've always respected. I respect ethical strategy, not betrayal and theft. I gathered the evidence back into my briefcase. The Oversight Committee meets in 30 minutes. I'll be sharing all of this with them, along with the authorities. Grant's expression hardened. I wouldn't recommend that approach. You seem to forget that as COO, I've had access to every aspect of Reynolds' development for years. My digital fingerprints might be on Artemis Ventures, but yours are all over the Eastside financial approvals. Who do you think the committee will believe orchestrated this fraud? The behind-the-scenes operations chief or the high-profile CEO whose signature authorized every transaction? You forged my authorizations, I said, though the realization of how thoroughly he'd covered his tracks was dawning with sickening clarity. Did I? The digital signatures match your encryption keys. The approval timestamps correlate with your calendar. And most damning of all, the funds flowed through accounts you established. Grant smiled thinly. I didn't just plan this as a business strategy, Olivia. I designed it as a masterpiece of misdirection. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had I underestimated the extent of Grant's preparations? Had I walked into his office with what I thought was checkmate, only to discover I'd been in check all along? Then I remembered the final piece of insurance I'd put in place last night. You're right about one thing, Grant. This was a masterpiece of planning. I reached into my pocket and withdrew my phone, tapping the screen to end the recording that had been running since I entered his office. Unfortunately for you, confessions of criminal conspiracy tend to simplify legal proceedings considerably. The confidence drained from Grant's face as understanding dawned. You were wired. Not just wired, broadcasting. I turned the phone to show him the active connection. Bennett's team has been listening to every word. So has a select group that includes the FBI's white-collar crime division and the SEC enforcement team. They're particularly interested in your $500 million ambitions. Grant's hand moved toward his desk drawer, but I was prepared for that too. I wouldn't. Besides the federal agents currently surrounding this building, Maya has building security on standby. There's nowhere to run, no counter-move to play. The door opened behind me, and Bennett entered with 2 agents in suits. Grant Lawson, one announced formally, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, and securities violations. As they led Grant away, he paused beside me. You know, Olivia, in chess there's a concept called zugzwang, when any move a player makes will worsen their position. I thought I'd placed you in zugzwang yesterday. Seems I underestimated your ability to change the game entirely. That was always your fundamental mistake, Grant, I replied quietly. You saw this as a game to win, while I saw it as a company and a life worth fighting for. The Oversight Committee meeting was postponed indefinitely as federal agents swarmed both Reynolds Development and Westlake Financial, gathering evidence and conducting interviews. Hayes was taken into custody at the cafe where he'd been meeting Daniel, his expression one of complete shock when agents interrupted their breakfast. By afternoon, the story had broken across Portland business circles, a complex fraud scheme, uncovered, arrests made, a prominent development project saved from sabotage. The Portland Business Journal, which had been poised to publish allegations against Reynolds Development, instead ran a front-page story about corporate espionage and my role in exposing it. I stood at my office window as the day faded into evening, watching lights come on across the city I'd helped shape. The East Side project would continue, though with new financial partners and enhanced oversight. Reynolds Development would survive, its reputation damaged but recoverable with time and transparency. My phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. Just finished with the federal investigators. Can we talk? I stared at the text for a long moment, considering all that had transpired since he'd walked into the summit with Sophia 2 nights ago. In some ways, that betrayal now seemed almost insignificant compared to Grant's elaborate deception. Yet it had been the catalyst that opened my eyes to all the other falsehoods surrounding me. Not today, I replied finally. Maybe not for a while. The divorce papers were already with my attorney. Whatever Daniel's degree of complicity in the financial scheme, his betrayal of our marriage was unambiguous. Perhaps in time I could view him with something other than hurt and disappointment, but that time was not now. Maya appeared at my door, her usual composure restored after the day's dramatic events. The federal agents have finished for the day. They'll continue tomorrow, but less disruptively. She hesitated. The board is requesting an emergency meeting tomorrow to discuss succession planning for the COO position. Schedule it for 10 a.m., I said. And Maya, thank you. For your loyalty, your discretion, everything. She smiled slightly. That's what partnerships are supposed to be built on, isn't it? Trust, loyalty, shared vision. Yes, I agreed, thinking of all the partnerships that had fractured in the past 48 hours. My marriage, my business relationship with Grant, the trust between Westlake and Reynolds Development. The challenge is recognizing the real ones from the, imitations. After Maya left, I gathered my things to leave for the day. The Avalon would be my home for a while longer, until I decided whether to keep the house or start fresh somewhere new. Either way, I would not be returning to the home Daniel and I had shared. Some spaces, like some relationships, couldn't be reclaimed once violated. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, I reflected on how much had changed since I'd sat waiting for Daniel at the summit, watching him approach with another woman on what should have been a celebration of our shared journey. The pain of that moment hadn't diminished, but it had been contextualized by everything that followed: the discoveries, the confrontations, the resolutions. Outside, Portland's evening embraced me with gentle rain and the familiar scent of wet pavement. I opened my umbrella and stepped into the night, not yet healed but irrevocably strengthened by the fire I'd walked through. The woman who had stayed silent until the bill arrived had found her voice in ways she never anticipated, and that voice would carry her forward into whatever came next. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.